This is going into like a deeper discussion now. Do you think it's something that has to come from Japan, or is it just the aesthetic?
What, anime?
Just
anime as a medium, you mean?
I guess.
I think some people
Or the anime aesthetic?
I guess when I, to expand on what you were asking, it's just like nowadays it feels like anyone uses any excuse to use just the term anime manga, and I'm guilty of that as well.
Yeah.
But it's just become a lot more commonplace whenever a new animation comes out, like Netflix or something. People are like, it's an anime, even though, it might not traditionally be made in Japan or whatever. Whatever. Anime is a fucking
The definition of anime died years ago. Yeah.
The definition of anime died
Has
years
never been
ago,
correct.
and it's never been correct.
Yeah.
But there's a certain vibe
Yeah.
that a lot of, at least old school anime fans, we gravitated towards a certain
look,
not even look, but just a certain vibe a lot of the times.
Yeah.
In terms of the media coming out of Japan. And I've actually been getting into Chinese animation a lot now, which has a very similar aesthetic to Japanese animation. Obviously, we all watch Link Click, for example.
Yep.
But I've been watching, Lord of Mysteries and To Be Hero X, which are other anime style shows, except coming from China. And it's a very, very similar vibe, but also every piece of media I see come from that has, I don't know how to put it into words. It's similar, but different. It almost feels like, when we see American-made anime or American anime-inspired shows.
Yeah.
There's something about it that reminds you of anime, but inherently feels American, or inherently feels like it comes from this place.
So like Avatar, for
like
example.
Avatar, for example, right? Looks anime, the plot progression feels very anime, and just something
But
about
is it an anime? No one knows.
but something about it, you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely American.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. I think probably in the case for, say, let's just use like Avatar as an example, right?
Yeah.
I think, first of all, that whole argument of like, is Avatar an anime or is it not an anime? It's just like irrelevant, because it's like, it's a good show regardless of how you define it, right? So that should be
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. But I think the main reason why a lot of people, when they first watched something like Avatar, who then immediately went, oh, this is an anime, is because maybe it had to do with the time that it came out, where like, at the time that Avatar came out on TV, there was also starting to be, we saw that first wave of like shows like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto and like, the early One Piece anime coming out simultaneously. So it might just be the fact that you watch a show and maybe I think instinctively when you watch something new, the first thing that a lot of people do subconsciously is start maybe comparing it to similar shows, or like maybe there's a certain aspect of the storytelling where it's like, oh, that kind of reminds me of like Naruto, or that kind of reminds me of Dragon Ball.
Yeah.
And so I think subconsciously from there, you just kind of, after you make that comparison, you think to yourself, well, all of these shows that this Avatar is compared to are all anime series, so it's giving me the same vibe, therefore I might conclude that this is an anime.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas, you might have some other cartoons out there that there is, even though it is animated and it may have like the anime look, maybe the storytelling isn't quite similar to any other anime that you know of or you may have seen. So it's harder to define it as an anime.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but like that's I think what's happening.
Yeah. So I have a specific example of this. I talked about Lord of Mysteries, which is a Chinese animation. And it feels very anime, and obviously with the aesthetics, it seems to it's how can I describe it? It's basically Bloodborne isekai. That is essentially condensing this massive lore and world building to a T. But there is this one scene, right, where I'll explain the basic setup. This guy wakes up in another person's body, right?
Okay.
And it's in a different world than what he's used to.
Okay.
Right? And he's a bit confused. He doesn't know what's going on. And so he then gets teleported to this like alternate dimension, right? And he's teleported with two other people. And he doesn't know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. And in my mind, if this was a traditional anime, I know how the main character would react. He would be like, "Oh, what's going on? Does anyone here know what's going on? You know, I don't know. There's a certain way the scene would play out.
Yeah, you would kind of you could expect how they might react.
Yeah. But in this scene, even though he's confused, transported to an alternate dimension, and there's other people asking him what's going on, what does he do? He immediately starts aura farming. He fucking goes up on the throne. He goes up on this throne, sits down, and just like does like the fucking Gendo Ikari pose. even though internally he's freaking out, he just starts aura farming.
Yeah.
And he's like, I see you've been summoned here. And he just starts bluffing, right?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, this just the way this character is handled, it feels very Chinese in terms of the vibe of this character itself.
Right,
and I was like, there's a certain nuance to how from the media that I've seen from like different countries. There's like a certain nuance that I can't always put my finger on.
Yeah.
But there's a certain way that different countries like to portray their characters.
Yeah, there's like cultural,
like
stereotypical cultural archetypes, I guess is the only way to put it, right? Whereas like, because like in as you said, in like a traditional anime, I think the reason why like the protagonist would be like, oh, what's going on, guys, is because I think maybe culturally a Japanese audience will look at a character like that and be like, oh yeah, that's what I would also be like in that situation. But maybe the Chinese will look at that and be like, nah, I ain't no pussy.
Yeah,
I'm aura farming.
And I'm not saying there is no Japanese anime that, you know, has characters like that.
Yeah.
But it's just a pattern I've noticed where
It's more rare,
it's also probably like a subconscious effect of like, I imagine, I mean, you've probably seen this as well when you've been working with the Japanese animation studio on your anime, is that like, I imagine there's just choices that are made, like very small things. Yeah. Constantly you're like, I don't think I would have done that. Yeah. Or like, I wouldn't have thought of that. Or I would have done things differently. Yeah. That like, I imagine those things subtly do add up over time. Yeah. To make the feeling of anime.
Yes.
Whether it be, you know, like the framing of a shot or how they showed a character moving or the physicality. I imagine all of those things are probably something that the director might have thought about from growing up and watching so much other Japanese media, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I think there are, to be like, this is the difference. It's like, I think there are probably some like thematical differences you can probably point to and say, these are like very different. But I think like overall, the differences and like the to be like, this show is anime, this not, is kind of reductive to the argument. I think it's not helpful. But you can like, you just know. You just watch it and you feel, you're like, this feels Japanese.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the sense that like, what the fuck does that even mean? Like, what the fuck does this is Japanese mean? Like, I don't know, it just feels different. Like, it feels foreign. I think like, it doesn't feel like something you would get from like your local TV network or national TV network, right? And I think that's like, it's
I think that's especially in the case with anime, because I feel as time goes on and, you know, there are so many more anime being made and there are people now who are in the industry making anime who probably also grew up watching anime and consuming it, that I think now it's become more common practice to find people. And again, I'm not general, like this is a vast generalization, obviously. There could be case by cases here, but I think for the most part, what I'm seeing is that like the reason why so much like kind of newer or like more modern anime feels so much more anime than back then is because so many of those people who are making the anime now also grew up on anime. So they know the formula and they know what works for them, but then it just becomes this loop of like anime being inspired by other anime. Whereas if you go back to say, you know, like the early Ghibli movies or
it's like incestuous.
Yeah, it's a little bit incestuous. Whereas like, and you know, again, that's not to say all modern anime is like
Ghibli also
that.
has like a lot of Western inspiration though as well.
Exactly, right? And that's why like when you watch a Ghibli film, especially like an older Ghibli film, it is anime 100%.
Yeah.
But it's not like anime, you know what I mean? Like it's the vibe is very unique in that aspect that makes it stand out from all of these other anime shows that have clearly been inspired by other similar anime or similar shows in that medium.
Yeah.
I saw this one time, a discussion where someone tried to argue, I thought it was an interesting point that like, I think at least further back, not recently, but like, you know, maybe pre-Ghibli even, that like when they wanted to discuss kind of taboo topics, they would often pick European or American settings because it was easier to explore those topics in the sense of like through a foreign country's perspective, as opposed to
Yeah.
being like, it's Japan.
Yeah.
This is like a scandalous marriage in Japan. Or something. It was like, no, well, the scandalous romance can be set in Europe in a castle.
Well,
or something.
because I'm sure a Japanese audience will look at that and being like, that doesn't happen in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about the West and like European countries, but it doesn't happen in Japan. I can see it happening in Europe, I guess, with the little knowledge that I have of other cultures. And so it's a little bit easier to stomach for a Japanese audience, I feel.
Well, there's also a lot of writing to draw from as well.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think because obviously, if you were born in like, I don't know, like 1920s Japan, or like you were a lot older, right? And you were probably, let's say you were like 40 when you were directing in like the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You probably would have been exposed to a lot more Western media at that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you would have. It is interesting.
Well, it's you know, to build off that, it's like, you know, as a weeb, you know, there were moments when every weeb may have this when they come to Japan, obviously, and you're walking down the city, or you're just you have a moment and you're like, damn, this feels so anime. And obviously, that's such a cringe line to say. Oh my god, this feels so anime. Oh my god, but like, to dig deeper into what that feeling is. Well, that is the experiences of the creators from Japan putting like a piece of their experience into the media that they've made, into anime itself. So of course, coming to Japan is going to feel like anime because that's you are experiencing the same experiences that the creators have put into the anime work themselves.
This must be like
know?
someone who's like a big Hot Fuzz fan or something in Japan, and then going to a pub in the UK and be like, "Whoa, what the fuzz?"
Well, I was going to say, it's exactly the same as like, I'm sure like a Japanese guy or girl who's like a massive fan of GTA will go to like Miami or LA for the first time and be like, oh, it's just like GTA.
Yeah, exactly.
It's exactly the same.
I do that.
I do that.
I fucking do that. You know?